Welcome to the Re-Up Men's Podcast with Tim Brown. I'm Brandon Porter. Re-Up is here to help men be the man God created them to be. We're glad you're listening, and we believe these next few minutes will be some helpful information for you as your journey through manhood. Tim, we want to talk about being wise. Probably the minute you hear that, someone pops in your mind as a wise influence God has placed in your life over the years.
No doubt. First thing, my own father pops into my mind. When I was younger, he wasn't one of my favorite people because he made me do things I didn't want to do. But I think back now to some of the things he imparted on me, especially with my work, when it comes to my work ethic and my view of work and things like that. A lot of wisdom he passed on there. His dad, my granddaddy Brown, we spent a lot of time with rabbit hunting with beagles. So the dogs would take off chasing a rabbit and would go off where you could barely even hear them. And he and I were just sitting on a log and talk, and so just the wisdom that was imparted from him. And then much later in life, obviously I've talked about Bob over the years, Bob Warren, how he poured into me and just the wisdom that came from him. And then a gentleman that a company I worked with for a while, it was the CEO there of that company, just a man of great wisdom, and I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time with him one-on-one. And so, I could go on and on and on. And I mean, besides the Lord, the reason the person I am today is because of some of those men and that wisdom.
So when you think about the reason you believe they are wise people, I mean, it's more than they were just good storytellers. I mean, you've met lots and lots of people, I'm sure, who are wonderful storytellers, but you didn't glean a lot of wisdom from those guys. What are some things that make them stand out as wise men in your life?
Well, now, my granddaddy Brown was good at both. He was a great storyteller. I'm not sure how many of them were true at times, but a lot of wisdom. I think you've got to really look at it from, okay, is what I'm hearing from this person something that will allow me to really fully be who I was made to be, and as I navigate through this crazy thing called life. And so I think that's, as you listen to people and they share things with you, I mean, we automatically go to experience. We think experience has a lot to do with wisdom, but I know a lot of guys with a lot of gray hair that aren't the wisest things in the world. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that, but experiences do normally play into it. And then Bob used to always tell me, actually I was listening to a sermon today from the pastor of the church I go to. He was over in Genesis when Jacob wrestled with God. And Bob used to always say, you really want to hang out with a man who's got a little bit of a limp to him. Apparently Jacob wound up having a little bit of a limp to him after he wrestled with God because he touching his hip bone like he did and all that. So you can visualize that, but that means that person has been through some things, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it may be. So when I really feel like I'm getting wisdom from somebody, it's from, when I look at it from, okay, is this really helping me grow in my walk with the Lord? And is it something that's helping me grow as a man that I was intended to be as I go through life and face those challenges? I think that's where we really have to, I guess that's the grid, I guess, to kind of run. Okay, is this wisdom or is this just a story? But and then the other neat thing as a Jesus follower, we have the Spirit in us. So as we hear things and people pour into us and tell us things or whatever, the Spirit can help us along with that too, because it can go, okay, that's truth. You need to remember that or whatever. So I could go on and on about it for a long time.
Well, let's back up for just a minute. Let's not lose that grid. You kind of built a little grid right there. Talk about that grid one more time. It's folks who've been impacted and made wise choices, and then also those who, in their wisdom to you, are helping you be the man God would want you to be. There may be more that you wanted to add there to that.
Yeah, I think, the definition of wisdom that I really grab hold of and move forward with was, whether it's right or wrong, is true wisdom is being able to view life from God's perspective. And obviously that's actually the third truth of what we, in our man journey of a biblical man too. We feel like the third truth of a biblical man is he as he views life from God's perspective. Again, if I really want to just find wisdom and that grid, as I look at things, I don't have my glasses on. I wear them lots of times, but if I was to put my glasses back on, wisdom to me is being able to look through the lens of God and be able to go, that's right, that's wrong, that's true, that's not true. That will benefit me as I move forward in life. That's going to lead me down a road I don't want to go down. I mean, it's just, we could go on, and but I think in this world of postmodernism and all the other craziness going on out there, wisdom really has to find its origin. And I think initially, is it based on truth? Truth has got to be the foundation of any wisdom. And again, as I listen to people, Bob used to always tell me this way. He said, Tim, you've got to get to a point in your life, in your own walk with the Lord and spending time with him and all that, where it could be a sermon, it could be a teaching, it could be a conversation, or whatever, that you can look at things, pick off the meat and throw away the bones. And that takes wisdom to be able to do that. So again, that viewing it from his perspective and through his eyes, I can look at that. Okay, that's meat, that's bones. That's meat, that's bones. But that doesn't happen overnight. There's no doubt about that. I've got a lot less hair, and what I do have is turning gray because of this journey of trying to go through life and experience it and have wisdom and do the right things and avoid the wrong things.
Well, a proverb that came to mind as we were thinking about this episode on wisdom is Proverbs 2 verse, there are several verses in Proverbs 2 that deal with wisdom, but specifically, just kind of to cut to the chase, Proverbs 2:9 says, wisdom leads to righteousness, to justice, to equity, and every good path. Some time back I settled in my mind that righteousness means right living. I think we can think that just simply having Bible knowledge is righteousness, and that's just not true. You are righteous because you put that knowledge into action, and I think it's a parallel track to wisdom, that the person who is wise is not only the person who knows what to do, but they actually do it. And so they're not just telling you what you should do, but they have modeled it and lived it themselves.
Yeah, I know you and I recently have had conversations about adult sons. I've had to learn that the best thing for me to do is just to model the right thing for them, not try to tell them what they should and shouldn't do, impact their thinking, and then as they watch me, them be able to go, okay, I may not tell Dad this because I don't want to give him credit. I see he's handling that situation, or he's doing this in the right manner. If I just told him what he should be doing and wasn't living it out in front of him, it's not going to impact him. It's just words. Righteousness always, it's interesting in the scriptures, what you were saying about doing the right thing. Of course, righteousness also is a right standing with God. So that's where it starts, is having that right standing. And then if you have that right standing and you're firmly planted in him and who you are, your identity and all that, then that allows you to do the right thing, which is righteous, living righteousness, in righteousness. But you got to have that right standing with him. I mean, you got to have that firm standing. Then, and that verse you read here, I'm looking at it myself. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity and every good path. And so, that right standing with him is really where wisdom starts. I mean, that's the origin of it.
Well, and you think about the right standing, we only have a right standing with God because of the one who lived rightly in every aspect of life and was therefore, deemed worthy to take on our sin and to stand in our place. And certainly we're talking about Jesus, who not only died and he rose again, but he lived perfectly on our behalf as well. And so our righteousness is ultimately his righteousness given to us. And that's what gives us that right standing that you're talking about.
Yeah, and again, I know we seem to always, in every episode, and guys may get tired of hearing this, we seem to always tie back in the man journey truths and principles, but living by his life, that second truth, doing this verse about doing the right thing, every good path, I mean, you'll just see things because he that's in you, and that came from Jesus, dying on the cross. We were baptized with him. We were a new creation. The old was crucified. We go on, that identity principle. And then because of that, and he in us, now we can have wisdom because he's there. He's the origin of wisdom. He's the creator of wisdom. And so as people make deposits into us, and we can discern the meat from the bones and all that, and that he helps us realize that, see that. He takes those truths and that wisdom and teaches us and grows us, because he's an ever ongoing knowledgeable God. And so we grow in that wisdom with him. And then as we walk through life, then that third truth, then it allows us, because of that wisdom and him in us and all that, to view life from God's perspective. I'm not saying we're going to always get it right, but we can look at things most of the time with the proper view and go, okay, at least I know what the right thing here is here. Doesn't mean I'll always do it, but because he's in me, I can take wisdom that's given to me and apply it, and it's just not head knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's interesting thinking about that, seeing the world as God sees it, the third truth there. It connects in with that justice and equity, that you know you're able to act justly, respond justly to situations in life, and then equity having to do with treating people fairly. And I think that connects into that third principle, the manhood journey, that we don't show partisan, that we don't show, we don't lean the scales one way or another. So injustice is shown in a situation. We're not, ethnicity, racism, things like that. We see through those eyes, like you've talked about many times on this podcast, that every person we see is a person created in the image of God and in need of the grace of God that only comes through Jesus Christ. And therefore we respond to them in that way and based on those truths and principles.
Yeah, I think one of the words I mentioned just a second ago and listening to you, it's kind of what you're saying too, is when you talk about wisdom, I think one of the other words you have to put in here with it is discernment, because that I've never really looked up. If I have, I don't remember what the definition of discernment is, the word, but to me, it's that viewing life from God's perspective. So wisdom leads to discernment, and then discernment allows you to view things the way you need through God's eyes. And I also think when it comes to wisdom, and we're talking about discernment, I think it's something that's attractive. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but that was one thing with Bob that I noticed about him was, after being around him the first few times, I'm like, okay, you know what? I can't explain it, but this guy views the world differently. He has a whole different discernment about him, and that's attractive to other people. So wisdom's great, helps us make good decisions, gives us discernment, choose the right path, do all those things. But I think the other thing we don't realize is how attractive that can be. Again, I know we're men. I'm not using the right word there, attractive, but or appealing, or catches
winsome.
our attention.
Yeah.
I think that's another cool thing about wisdom, is when you find a guy that just is able to look at things and go, that's right, that's wrong, that's true, that's not true, pick off the meat, throw away the bones, deal with things differently. Again, I was just amazed at the way Bob viewed work and the way he viewed money and all those things, just his wisdom. And that was his discernment when it came to those things. And that was attractive to me. So I just think it's amazing how that can draw people to you. And then obviously then the gospel can kick in too, because you're kind of living it out, the gospel in that manner as well.
Yeah. And I think so much of what you're talking about there, the attractiveness of that person who is able to be discerning, or the person you see as wise, not necessarily that they have all the answers, because they may not experience everything you experience in your life. But when you see them experience something, that they're stepping out on faith to go through that journey, through that part of their life as well, you see them rest in the truths of God's word, rely on the power of the Holy Spirit in their life, pray, seek wisdom and counsel from other people. And those things are the attractive things, that they don't just leap before they look, or kind of that ready, fire, aim. They have a set system and process, and you can see how they consistently make decisions. And I want to be like that, because I face challenges throughout life that I'm not exactly sure if I should step left or step right here. but I see these guys around me, and they tend to make decisions that are honoring to God and that are beneficial to their family, to their church, to others around them. And so, it reminds me of the importance of a fire team, of why we need to surround ourselves with guys who are in the Word together and guys who are journeying through life. And we may not be on the exact same path when it comes to a career or where we are in the stage of our family, but we are guys who can discern and help one another as we make those decisions moving forward in life.
No doubt. You talk about, we go through different things. Some guys don't go through the same things that the other guys do or whatever. But a really practical example I think about that Bob used to share all the time with any age group of people, because it applied to them, was most everybody makes a decision on buying a vehicle, young, old, whatever. Bob had such a different perspective on the way you look at buying a vehicle. He had such wisdom. And most people going in, they just want to know what the payment's going to be a month. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately, the car manufacturers and financing and all that have programmed us to think that's our default. That's just the way we think now. Unless you're going to walk in and write a check for, $70,000 and walk out. And there are people that can do that. But I'm not one of them.
Me neither.
Yeah. So, but he said you should always look at purchasing a car or something, whatever, a big purchase. But he would use the car as not okay. Here's the payment, which is going to be a month, or what the car is going to cost. Period. Then you need to divide the number of hours that you work a week into that figure. Kind of come up with. Take your salary that you make a year, or your money you make, and divide it by the number of hours you average a week. And you can come up with, kind of your hourly figure for your work. And then, so that payment is $600 a month. He said, then you take, okay, well then if you're making $20 an hour or whatever, then you can figure out how many hours of your month has to go just to make that car payment.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, then you got insurance, you got to put new tires on it every now and then. You got to change the oil. So figure all that into the cost, and then figure up how many hours of your life it's going to take for that, as he would say, 4 pieces of rubber and fiberglass that runs up and down the road. And when you look at it from that perspective, you're like, oh my gosh. So then you take every other purchase you make, whatever, and you're just like, well, all I do is work, and it's taken away from my family. So it's just simple things like that. I can remember I sat in on a conversation he had with a young person that was getting ready to buy a car, and he did this with them, and they were like, wow, never thought about that. They still bought a car, but they changed what they were going to do and got great wisdom. So I know that's just a real simple, practical example, but it's one almost every person deals with. And we're programmed to think, what's the payment going to be a month? The wisdom Bob would pass on, and the discernment was, no, how many hours of your life a month is it going to take? And that changes the way you look at it. So what's it doing? You're putting on a different set of glasses and view it through God's eyes on purchasing something instead of your own eyes. So I think somebody was listening to the first few minutes of this and they're like, give me a real practical example. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, that one's great. That's fantastic. Well, as we try to wrap up, what are some things that maybe you would pass on? Maybe some things that really, that's obviously one right there, the way you view the world and that affects your decision making. What's maybe something else that has been given to you that you would want to say, this is in my top 2 or 3 things that I would want to pass on to somebody else when it comes to wisdom?
Well, I'm looking at a list here called 40 things that we should know that I've used ever since it was passed on to me, which has allowed me to have some decent wisdom, and it's all based around Scripture. But obviously, the first one is before you make any big decision, always seek wisdom and counsel from some other guys. I was listening to a guy today talking. He was saying, when I planted this church and we got ready to start it, I immediately picked out 6 men older than me that had wisdom and all that. And every decision I was going to make for the church, I sat down with those guys first. And so make sure you've got that. So a fire team, somebody that you can look at as a Paul that's maybe a few years ahead of you and has that wisdom. So always seek for wisdom. Don't just talk about wisdom. Always seek it. Be ongoing. Make it a verb in your life. Be always seeking it from the Word and obviously from other people. And then the second one is try to spend at least 30 minutes a day in the Word, because that's where wisdom comes from. I know that sounds, the 30 minutes in word and prayer. I mean, that's pretty simple, but why not spend time with the creator of wisdom as much as you can and have conversation with him, which is prayer. And then the third one is kind of the one I just talked about, that learn to view material possessions in relation to time instead of money. And, so I'll never have a big home. I'll never drive expensive cars. Number one, I can't afford them. But the other thing is if I can't write a check for them, then it's going to take a lot of my time to pay for them. So those they're the top three on this list as I'm looking at it. And they were, those are the ones I've tried to really use a lot in my own life.
Absolutely. Well, make sure to check out the resources at reupmen.com, or you can go to reuppodcast.com and find those resources. There are a lot of them that deal with wise living. That's a topic that we think of often, of how to use the time that God has given us here on planet Earth in the greatest way. And so you can find those resources at reuppodcast.com. We hope you'll subscribe to our podcast. We thank those of you who are listening on whatever platform you're on, Apple, Spotify, wherever you are. And then those of you watching on YouTube, we hope you'll share this with your friends, and maybe it'll be an encouragement and a blessing to them as well. Thanks so much for listening to the Re-Up Men's Podcast with Tim Brown. I'm Brandon Porter.